Nightmares. No matter who you are, chances are you've had one. Running but getting nowhere, screaming but making no noise, your teeth falling out, or Konami releasing another interactive Silent Hill game. There's countless variations and an infinite source of inspiration, both in real life and popular media. But what if they didn't just plague our dreams? What if they were made manifest, ready to hunt us down and snuff us out? That is the reality Little Nightmares envisions, a world of death, despair, and monsters. This franchise is incredibly complex, tackling countless morbid themes and presenting them through the lens of a child to staggering effect. It's not the first game to tackle this perspective, but it's damn near the best of them. A fever dream that can best be described as Hellraiser meets Studio Ghibli. And I, for one, couldn't ask for a better source of inspiration. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Little Nightmares is a celebration of every phobia known to man, and in this video, we'll be exploring their deepest depths, from the metal confines of the moor to the empty streets of the Pale City, and every nasty crevice in between. So let's begin this little tale, one that starts, true to its name, with a nightmare. Waking from the dream, we find a small girl sleeping on a suitcase with her yellow raincoat contrasting the bleak metallic surroundings. This girl's called Six, and she's the unassuming hero of this tale. We don't know the circumstances that led her to this dingy location, or even where this dingy location is, so all we can do is push forward, moving down a dark hallway where small creatures are lurking just out of sight. Leaving our small abode, we pass through a vent and cross over a wooden bridge where we get our first look at the scale of this location, revealing a seemingly endless expanse. Impossibly large chains pass between the rusted walls with metallic crunches echoing in the distance. Something else to note is the camera itself. It's swaying back and forth like a ship lost at sea. Now, this could just be to display the dizzying scale of the environment, or maybe the environment really is swaying in some capacity. There's no way to tell from here. All we know is wherever we are, we're deep in its bowels. And just up from the stairs, there's a strange artifact hiding away to the left. A statue fashioned after the masked woman from the start of the game. The one dressed in a kimono wearing a porcelain mask, known as a no mask in Japanese performing arts. The game starts with a dream about this person, and there's even statues of them scattered around the ship, so they're clearly significant, but we just don't know to what extent. We can pick up the statue, but we can't take it with us. So in true childlike fashion, we yeet that bitch into the abyss. Another mystery. We don't know what it does, but based on the uplifting jingle, surely smashing them's a good thing. I'm like 37% sure we're not releasing some ancient evil here. And besides, we're just silly kids having goofy fun. But of course, the good times never last, and in the following room, we get our first disturbing encounter. Dropping into a bedroom of sorts, we see a body hanging from the ceiling, only its long legs visible. Despite this shocking scene, Six displays no emotion. There's no scream or tears, she just ignores it. Granted, it's possible she's just too young to really comprehend what she's seeing, but to me it symbolizes how violent and hopeless the world she lives in is. Based on a lack of reaction, you could assume that Six has already seen so much violence in her short life that this horrific sight means nothing. All she does is drag the chair from beneath him and use it to reach the door handle. That shit's cold. A depressing moment that contrasts perfectly with the following scene. Entering a kitchen and opening a fridge, one of the critters from earlier scatters out and hides in a crack in the wall. Following it, we discover a small, pale creature with a large cone covering its head. These are gnomes, and gnomes are our friends. Light the lamp and he'll warm his little hands, or better yet, we can give him a big old hug. After which they'll follow us for a short while and make a bad attempt at mimicking our actions, from crouching to jumping. They're adorable, and they serve as an interactive reward for thorough exploration. With a collective 15 to find, each one is worth hunting down just for the hug alone. Nomophobia, the irrational fear of gnomes. And I know that that's not what's happening here. We love the gnomes, but I wanted to bring that phobia to your attention because it means that someone somewhere in the world watched Romeo and Juliet and thought, wow, that's the scariest fucking thing I've ever seen in my life. And that really, it just makes you think. Yes, I'm aware that this looks more like a hazmat suit than a raincoat. And yeah, I am technically cosplaying as a 9-year-old girl right now. It's not that weird. Why would you say it's weird? You're the one making it weird. But back to my point, while you can easily miss this encounter, it's likely no coincidence that it directly follows from the previous room. They're two completely different takes on life. One is hopeless and, well, over, while the other is optimistic and cute, choosing to befriend a creature that could easily have been hostile. Six isn't incapable of showing emotions, she's just selective about it. Climbing up the fridge and into the next section, we encounter the game's first enemy, a leech. There's no proper combat in Little Nightmares. Instead, if we walk anywhere near it, the leech consumes us, entrapping Six like a python and draining her dry. For now, one leech on its own, it's no problem. They're slow moving and easy to avoid. Even 2 or 3 is a breeze. But moments later, while chasing a gnome, the wooden floor breaks, dropping us into a dark basement while a swarm of leeches closes in. The sheer volume mixed with limited visibility turns them into a real nightmare. There's a door at the far end, and getting there's a delicate ballet of running back and forth, grouping up leeches and trying to loop them for a clear path. And with patience or countless retries, we break through. You'll likely notice that as a game, it plays out mechanically and even thematically very similar to Playdead's Limbo and Inside games. Both feature a lost child in a hostile world, and both employ a system of environment-based storytelling. These are games you could easily play through and see nothing more than a creepy platformer with disturbing creatures, but dig a little deeper and there's mountains of theories and lore to uncover. It was developed by Tarsier Studios, a relatively small team of 77 employees located in PewDiePie land, where funny enough, they got their first big break assisting Media Molecule with the Little Big Planet DLC.
Just a simple press of this button, our adventure will begin.
Leeches avoided, we step into a large hallway, a connecting point between 2 different sections, except this time, something's moving above. Yeah, it's not Pyramid Head, sorry to disappoint, but a long-armed creature dragging a cage. And looking at the location ahead, the windows are barred with a rope made from blankets offering a way inside. It would seem that this is some kind of prison, and that this rope wasn't used to gain entry, but rather to escape. An ominous warning, but we have nowhere else to go, so we climb up and head inside. Discovering not a brutal prison filled with hardened criminals, but rather a child's play area with swings, seesaws and toy trains. This enormous block with electric fences and barred windows, it's for children. And we know it's not for their protection either, because after leaving the cells, we stumble across a bizarre security system. An eye whose beam will freeze us solid if we're spotted. And beside an overturned crib, we see the frozen remains of various children. Something you'll notice is that despite being very young, they're already far larger than Six. So you might be thinking, why is Six so small? If these kids are little more than toddlers, how is Six a quarter of their size, and yet she's walking around solving complex problems? To my thinking, there's 2 real theories. Either she's a different species to these babies altogether, or maybe Six isn't small at all. Maybe the larger size of everything in the world reflects her childlike state, seeing the mysterious outside world as something larger than it is, something we've all done. How many times have you visited a childhood home or park many years later for the castle-like scale to be shockingly small in comparison to our memories? That or small kid make good game design. It's up to you. Very little of the game's world is ever truly explained. This is a make your own decisions kind of game. There's no wrong answers, except for anyone that disagrees with me in any way at all. Your answers are all wrong. Whatever the case, we need to get around the eye, using the environment to avoid its gaze in a Medusa-style game of hide and seek. Slipping past and exploring the upper levels, we enter an open cell, finding more leech slime under the bed and pictures of eyes strewn all across the cell. Clearly, the children were painfully aware of the eye's presence and of what being caught would mean for them. Crossing the hall, we get our first glimpse at the kids in question, but as we enter and the door slams behind us, their caretaker enters. It's the long-armed creature from earlier, feeling around in the darkness and looking for the source of the sound as we hide under a bed and hold our breath. After it leaves the room, we're free to explore the bedroom to our heart's content, and despite my best efforts, we can't wake any of them, no matter how loud we jumped or how hard I tried to clock one on the head. The only takeaway from this encounter is that the long-armed monster, Roger, aka the janitor, he's overseeing these children and he's highly vigilant. And after climbing out of the bedroom, our stomach starts to rumble. At first, it's nothing to worry about. I mean, clearly the child's hungry. Who knows how long it's been since she ate? But without any warning, the rumbles turn into all-consuming pain. We're slow to a crawl, our heart is throbbing, and we keel over as if we'll die if we don't eat. But as luck would have it, we're just in front of the canteen and a child is watching. And after a moment of contemplation, they stand and throw their bread through the bars, saving our life with the tiny morsel of food they had. Something that clearly weighs heavy on them as they return to their seat and hug their legs. It's not clear when or if they'll be able to eat again, but such is the world of Little Nightmares. It's cold, unforgiving, and any act of kindness will leave you worse off with nothing in return. And with that message, Act 1 is over. The second act begins in front of a large staircase where we head up to discover what looks like a dead end. But while looking around, a gnome scurries into a closet, revealing a secret locked room. There's no way to open it, but turning to leave, I just so happened to stand on a special tile and the door temporarily opened. And this is an important learning moment for the player. Be suspicious of your environment because there are secrets to be found. Dragging a chair across, we place it on the tile and gain entry, finding a large eye with a single button and pressing it. The eye activates, revealing an elaborate CCTV system. They're always watching, even children while they sleep. It harks back to the George Orwell's 1984 themes of oppressive authority.
Right, let's see which one of us can touch his toes.
It's a perverse invasion of privacy, from bedrooms to kitchens and finally what looks like the private quarters of the masked lady. Leaving the observation room and heading deeper, we don't make it very far before hunger strikes again. This time with a haunting music track to boot. Desperate for food, we push forward and stumble across a cage, with food waiting at its center. It looks like a trap, but rats are already snacking away and nothing's happening. So it's not motion activated, and even if it was, I don't think we have a choice, which goes to show how severe the pains are. She's not only willing to put herself in danger, she's also willing to eat rotten meat that's been shared with several potentially disease-carrying rodents. Entering, we chow down on the giblets when a familiar set of arms swoop in and slam the door shut. The janitor knew exactly what he was hunting, and we took his bait like the rats themselves. Waking up sometime later, our cage is stored alongside several other kids where it's evident they're being processed. Cage and child dragged to some unknown fate, we need to escape as quick as possible. So by running back and forth, we're able to drop off the side and break the cage. And once freed, we make no attempt to save the other children. We can't even try, despite knowing that they're in serious trouble. We even have the audacity to use a cage as a stool, jumping from it and swinging out the room before the door shuts. This callousness, alongside her earlier indifference to the hanging man, it makes you question exactly who we're playing as. Has the cynical nature of the world really made her this indifferent to the suffering of others, or is she actually just a bad person, maybe even slightly wicked? Trying to figure out where the janitor's brought us, we eventually stumble across the man himself, engrossed in his work, where we get to see exactly what his job is. The children are being reared, then taken and parceled like a butcher with a fine cut of meat, before being hung on a hook conveyor belt. And this hook system alone should be an ominous sign of this operation's sheer scale. But where are these parcels going and to what end? We can only speculate, but what we do know is that it can't be good. Watching this creature work, it becomes clear that the janitor's blind, working off sound and feeling his way through the work. He wasn't touching around the child's room because it was dark. That's just how he sees the world, using his long arms like antennae. There's only one way forward though, by sneaking behind him, and after plucking up the courage, the floorboard creaks, causing the creature to turn around and inspect the area, feeling within inches of us, before walking away. The encounter reminded me a lot of Pan's Labyrinth, specifically the scene with the Pale Man, a movie that makes for a great comparison to Little Nightmares. Both feature young heroines fighting for their lives in a mysterious world where fact and fiction blur together in a horrific mess. For the rest of the level, Six and the janitor play a lethal game of cat and mouse, with the janitor blocking our progression in a variety of ways, resulting in Six looking for distractions in the environment, like clapping monkeys, or the dinging of broken clocks. All of which are interspersed with heart-wrenching chase sequences, where one wrong step will land us in the janitor's long clutches. No matter where we run, this monster is always one step ahead. There's even a moment where we have to winch open a hatch, and the whole time you know it's going to hear you, so you have to speed through the turns, managing just to slip through its grasp and dropping into a vent. And inside that vent, we arrive at what looks like a disposal room, with hundreds of shoes piled up, along with other personal effects. It would seem this well-oiled machine has processed countless victims, invoking imagery of genocide as seen across various wars. But it's not just the imagery you have to worry about. Dropping down and wading through, something's lurking beneath the surface, ready to pull us down if we don't reach solid ground fast enough. Zigzagging between surfaces, we eventually reach an exit, and while mooching down a long hallway, the janitor drops behind us, chasing Six until we reach a lift, but it's a dead end. There's nowhere to run, so we hide inside an overturned box as the beast lurches inside, searching for us. With the lift ascending, we wait, hoping he doesn't reach into the box, and while here, we get a better look at the creature, with its big old teeth grinding harder than your average Molly enthusiast. And looking at his face, his skin's been pulled down, flapping over his eyes and revealing a bare skull. It would seem then that the janitor isn't blind naturally, but rather the folds of its skin are blocking its vision. It's as if his mask of humanity has slipped, and being blind to the horrors occurring was the only way he could maintain his work. And if we look at any of the most famous monsters ever made, the Cenobites, Freddy Krueger, Slender Man, Skylar White.
My name is Skylar White, yo.
You'd be hard-pressed to find any monster that doesn't at least have a basis in human anatomy, and that's how Little Nightmares goes about designing their monsters. They're all disturbing, but all based on caricatures of the human form, with engrossed sizes or gangly limbs, and it's as effective here as it's always been. Also, with the fedora, the long hands, and even the ear-to-ear grin, I wouldn't be surprised if this character was intended as a nightmarish version of Mr. Tickle from the Mr. Men series. I mean, what better way to demonstrate a child's nightmare than to demonize a childhood icon? After surviving a few more tense encounters, we finally bring this chase to its climax, sliding into a dead end with a heavy door stuck on a metal cage. Reaching in with his long arms, he taps around trying to find and capture us. We avoid his arms by jumping between two platforms, and when we find an opening, dive towards the box and break its two supporting beams. Slamming the door shut, both arms are severed, rendering the janitor a danger to no one, being both blind and armless. Oh, and in grotesquely humorous fashion, the arms will wriggle and tap around with a life of their own for a few moments before finally coming to a rest. The following level starts with a ride across the meat hook system, dangling over an impassable ridge and landing on a mound of wrapped bodies. And climbing down, we're instantly hit with pangs of hunger. But as luck would have it, our dinner's just been caught. A nice, juicy rat. Unlike the previous encounters, which were more or less food, this is a different undertaking altogether. It's a living, dirty creature, but the hunger, it's unbearable, so needs must. And speaking of culinary delights, we're now in the kitchen, run by the chef. A sickly skinned butcher with a drooping cherub-like face, punctuated by sad, dead little eyes. It's like looking in a fucking mirror. He's preparing dishes in a large kitchen, one we must navigate carefully, making any kind of noise, and that cook will be hot on us, chasing us around the counter to the best of his limited ability. Encounters in this level offer a more traditional gameplay experience, running from monsters, hiding out of sight, and looping around the environment trying to find a way out. Little Nightmares is often described as stealth-based, but apparently Tarsier prefer the term hide-and-seek. Feeling the term stealth might even give the slightest impression of an empowered character, and I agree, it does feel like a lethal game of hide-and-seek. This lumbering monster is too large to reach under the table, so rather than fully committing to capturing us, they treat Six as a minor nuisance and continue their work.
I don't get paid enough for this shit.
After all, they're just the cook. Security isn't their main concern. But once you've got over the fear of their presence and familiarize yourself with their behavior, venturing out and running between counters does embody a cheeky sense of childlike play despite the horrors that unfold if we're caught.
It's fucking...
And we do need to talk about the location itself, because it's where the children's bodies were being packaged and shipped, bow tie and all. It would seem the elaborate prison downstairs is nothing more than a sick form of livestock, fueling whatever feast is underway. A little humanoid amuse-bouche, if you will. A process we witness firsthand when we activate a sausage-making machine by dropping hunks of meat into a grinder.
Tonight on Kitchen Nightmares, Gordon goes head-to-head with the most stubborn chef he's ever met.
Hunks we find in a freezer room, pre-chopped, next to various hanging packages. Now, this could be A5 Wagyu beef for all we know, but one would wager it's from a more ominous source, and by grinding it all up, we build a DIY sausage swing. Our path to freedom is literally forged off the back of less fortunate captives. And if you had any doubts about the scale of the feast being prepared, the pot wash room makes it abundantly clear. There are hundreds of dishes. It's not for one or even a group of people. It's evidently for hundreds, maybe even thousands, and it's all being fueled in the most horrific way imaginable, with carrots. Ugh. We also discover that the chef has an identical twin, one he works and even lives alongside, as demonstrated by their twin beds and even twin toilets. I mean, imagine that. Sitting cheek to cheek, shitting with your bro. Does life get any better? With the two of them, being spotted becomes a lot harder. They're able to work together, cutting off loops and generally covering more ground. I mean, I'm no mathematician, but his addition makes the area at least twice as challenging.
Clever girl.
In appearance, the only difference is their mouth and eyes, with one set appearing dead with a wide gob, and the other having wonky eyes and a pretty little puckered mouth. And the real kicker here? That's not even their face, it's a mask. And while we'll never know what lurks underneath, if they consider this a marked improvement, they must be concealing one ugly mug. Anyway, as luck would have it, one of these stacks are positioned right where we need them, under the meat hook conveyor. Also, the wicked irony that the most useful tool in our journey so far has been a conveyor belt designed for processing children really shouldn't be lost on us. But when we spot an opening, we clamber up, avoiding the twins and riding out of the kitchen into another transition zone, where we quickly dismount and avoid capture before jumping back on the hook just before the chefs get hold of us. Both of whom have had enough of our running amok. Leaving the hook, we quickly stumble across a hatch with a bright light radiating through, and by climbing up, we finally discover where or what this location is. It's an enormous vessel, miles away from humanity, deep at sea, which means even though we found a way out, we're still stuck because we have nowhere to go. And yes, I know if you watched any of the promotional material, you'll have known that this was a vessel deep at sea, but I went into playing these games completely raw, and that realization was a real kicker for me because it just shattered any hope of escape that 6 had. So for anyone that hadn't played the game and hadn't watched the promotional material, I withheld that information just so that they could experience it with me. But back to the more, and to make matters worse, a whole host of new guests are arriving, walking into the ship in an endless procession. Like the twins, they're obese, with squat proportions and hunched postures, but they are dressed to impress, suited and booted, walking like cattle deeper into the vessel. Is this a secret gathering of the world's elite, here to eat the most forbidden food money can buy, or is this some nightmarish Noah's Ark situation, where waters have flooded the earth, forcing its remaining few to huddle on board one vessel and grow food no matter the cost? We're in the penultimate act now, arriving to a vastly different environment. Fashioned with Japanese decor, this area looks like a traditional sento, and with a guttural chant, the guests file in. Following them inside, for the first time, we see the food being consumed. It's a piggish feeding round, with countless guests tearing into their meals, hidden behind shoji screens or sat shoulder to shoulder at high tables. Between the chanting, scoffing, and various wet noises, this entire scene is revolting in such a unique way, especially when you bear in mind what these people are actually eating. This scene really reminded me of Spirited Away. In particular, the start, where Chihiro's parents eat the witch's food without permission, pigging down on it until they're transformed into pigs themselves. And it turns out this inspiration wasn't just in my head. In a 2017 interview, lead designer Dennis Talajic and producer Henrik Larsson said, "We find inspiration from many places. Among others, we find inspiration from Studio Ghibli movies and also the City of Lost Children." And the latter is an interesting one, because despite loving Ron Perlman, I'd never seen that film. So I sat down to watch it and I was mesmerized, partially because of the surrealistic metal art style, but also because it was balls to the wall insane. And while I'm no expert, there's one clear theme throughout: childhood innocence, both the fight to preserve it and the various ways in which it can be corrupted, with the octopus using orphan children as thieves and Crank stealing them to try and extend his life. It is an exceptionally entertaining movie, made all the more entertaining by the fact that Ron Perlman, despite starring in a French movie, doesn't speak a lick of the language.
One impossible. One bubble.
Returning to our guests, despite having more food than anyone could possibly consume, it's still not enough. Once spotted, the guests will throw their food aside, crawling like animals to try and reach 6, ready to eat a child whole given the chance. This unstoppable, all-consuming hunger is the biggest theme present throughout Little Nightmares. In fact, the game was originally titled just Hunger, and was later changed when Bandai Namco agreed to publish the game. But we see the hunger not only represented with the guests, but also with 6 and her increasing pains, both of which are housed inside an enormous sea-based engine designed from the ground up to provide it all. This endless hunger, to me at least, serves almost as a mockery of humanity's excessive capitalism. I know that sounds pretentious as fuck, and maybe even a little bit cringe, but don't worry, I'm not about to whip out the Communist Manifesto, just hear me out. Little Nightmares is like a horrific version of WALL-E. In that movie, humanity returns to Earth on a giant ship as a group of immobile, lazy consumers, happy to sit around all day eating whatever comes their way, unable to even walk by themselves. Little Nightmares takes that idea and sprinkles a bit of Edgar Allan Poe into the mix, presenting a ship filled with grotesque humanoids consuming endlessly until they're too large to walk, literally gorging themselves to death. There's an easy comparison between the two stories, and both are a warning to the viewer. Sometimes overconvenience and excess don't breed happiness. But back to the game, if this hunger is affecting everyone present, maybe that explains the feast. Perhaps they're opting for a gruesome final blowout. Rather than fading over time, they're gathering and burning up like bright stars. It seems like a solid possibility, but then who runs this ship and what do they get out of it? They can't be consumed by the same hunger or they would have gorged to death as well. And we've already seen multiple creatures that aren't obsessively consuming food, like the janitor or the masked woman. So there's still plenty of mysteries to unravel. And after exploring the area for a short while, multiple screens burst open and several guests crawl towards us. They appear as single entities at first, crawling beside each other in piggish anticipation. But as they push against one another, they merge into a singular mass, driven forth by nothing more than greed, chasing us under tables, through hallways, and nearly into the abyss itself. Having swung to safety, we're not out of the woods yet, because another pang of hunger hits 6, and as always, it's worse than the last. Passing into a dining room, we stumble across a gnome offering a sausage to eat, but sadly, our desire's too great. A sausage won't cut it. Despite being our friend, we consume the gnome, and by this point, it's impossible not to compare 6 and the guests we've been avoiding. They are also driven by an insatiable hunger, eating animals and children alike. Something that initially seems ghoulish and insane is now easily within reach for 6, who appears unable to control her hunger, harming an innocent living being that was already offering her food. Also, I don't know if it's a coincidence, but the gnome's body looks like a little mushroom here. I don't know, I thought that was worth pointing out. He looks like a fun guy. Anyway, remember earlier when I encouraged you to bear the leeches in mind? Well, now we see 6 acting much the same, slinking about in the shadows, draining the life of innocent beings when needs must. But with that, we're done in the guest area, and following the lead of the mysterious woman, we take the lift to her personal quarters. The location's pristine, with wooden decor, stacked bookshelves, and a woman's hum emanating from upstairs. Following this swan song, we enter a dressing room, passing multiple mannequins to find the lady brushing her hair in front of a broken mirror. Almost like Sadako in the Curse videotape. Notably, every mirror in her quarters is broken. Couple this with her mask and we can assume she either won't or can't look at her own reflection. Either way, we got a sneak behind her, and after our earlier encounter with the janitor, we're conditioned to expect the worst. Each crooked plank had me clutching my pearls as we journeyed across and into her boudoir to smash a vase and grab a key for the exit. This causes the lady to stop singing immediately as we hide under the bed and anticipate her arrival, but she never comes, which means we've got to hype ourselves up to leave safety and try to grab the key. Slowly walking past her dresser to find it empty. Using said key, we enter an abandoned wing filled to the brim with mannequins, all of which serve to trick you in the darkness, looking exactly like the kimono woman, and ultimately, it's not just our mind playing tricks on us. She's onto us and she's fast as hell, able to appear out of thin air and sprint burst towards 6. Running away, we enter a storage room, pry open a sealed closet and find the only mirror left unbroken. Time for some exposure therapy. Chucking it off the cabinet, we bring it back to the previous room where the final boss fight begins. As circles of light appear, we waddle over and wait for the lady to launch herself at 6. Repeating this process several times, or to be specific, 6 times, very clever, we eventually emerge triumphant. With the mirror smashing and the lady lying on the floor unable to move. But before reveling in our victory, the hunger strikes again, and it's no surprise what happens next. Consuming the lady, this time we not only get her sustenance, but a dark power is absorbed into 6. Whatever ancient evil resided in this woman, it belongs to us now. Riding a lift to the main lobby, we see a very different Six. She's hunched forward in a menacing stance as darkness floats about her. Walking forward, the lights stutter and shatter at her approach until finally we come face to face with a guest ready to eat us whole. But as they reach down, without so much as flinching, she kills and consumes them. With her new power, the hunger that's plagued her journey can be satiated at any time with ease. A potential indication of why these guests were accommodated at the mall in the first place. Perhaps they were being inflated to offer greater life forms for the lady to consume. She offers them the ultimate feast, then devours them, taking their bodies and cooking them alongside the children as fodder for the next guest. But with the powers in Six's hand, the guests are being dispatched indiscriminately, as they probably well deserve. And reaching the end of the hall, the front gates slowly open. Cascading light down as we march up, ready to face the world, watched from below by any gnomes we hugged on our journey, observing with curiosity the powerful new entity that just tore through the ship. As credits roll, you'll likely be left with two main questions. Who the hell is Six? And deuces for the kimono gal. Well, in my opinion, they're more or less one and the same. Now, of course, they could be a completely unrelated pair who just so happen to cross paths, but it's evident throughout that there's a deeper connection between the two, and there's a few theories around what this could be. To me, the most likely of the bunch is that Six is actually the daughter of the lady, or at the very least, some entity conjured up to inherit her powers and succeed her. A theory that's given real weight from a picture in the lady's bedroom, that of a small girl, and below it, the same child in a yellow raincoat with her face scratched out. Not only that, but on her staircase, we see a picture of the woman stood with 4 other ladies of similar build and appearance, which means at one point, there was 5 of them, which is a hell of a coincidence, seeing as our character is called Six. And if you really wanted to deep it, even the way we defeat the woman could imply we're her child. As the saying goes, children are a reflection of their parents, and here we see a symbolic phrase used literally to free Six. In my opinion, that was a very compelling case, but lo and behold, it was wrong. You stupid fuck. During a Q&A for PlayStation, the lead narrative designer, Dave Mervick, said categorically, Six isn't the daughter of the lady, and you're weird for thinking that. To quote, "The reality is that these two characters have been thrown together by forces beyond their control. The child wants to escape, and the adult wants to keep the child trapped forever. How people could see this as a mother-daughter relationship, I just don't know." Now look, no one has the right to tell the creator of something how their work should be perceived. They made the art, and as far as I'm concerned, they have final say in how and what that narrative plays out like. It's their choice, and that's the end of the story. But to me, it was a bizarre thing to say. Like, if you have a clear narrative idea of what you want the plot to be, why make such an ambiguous game? And that really is the main gripe I have with his response, is that it is an ambiguous game with environmental storytelling open to a wide variety of interpretation. Why make it that way if you're going to shut down the theories that spawn because of it? Like the painting, the power, the 5 women, and our character's name, it all seems so perfectly aligned, or at the very least, a very viable theory. And as a closing thought on that, I'm glad this developer clearly has a loving, caring parent that wants to look after him and see him thrive, but the dynamic of a self-centered mother ruining their child's life to prop up their own, it's not outlandish, and it makes for a great theme. And if you want proof of that, go watch OPAL here on YouTube.
Hi, OPAL!
It's a work of art, and I recommend everyone go and watch it, but the point I'm making is that these themes aren't completely outlandish, and to imply that they are, it kind of seems a little bit out of touch. Although, if you'll allow me, I'd like to spin one more theory. I feel like this ending changes the very meaning of the game's title, Little Nightmares. While at first, it correlates to the many horrific encounters, now, with Six being an unstoppable killing machine with a slightly questionable moral code, maybe the game's title was always about creating a little nightmare, a name often given to difficult, troublemaking children. How will Six choose to handle her powers? We don't know, but based on a post-credit scene, there's a whole new ship arriving to play with. With the curtains falling, you might notice that this is a very short game. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, it's expertly crafted and not a single scene went to waste or dragged on. And in my thinking, a beautiful, concise game is infinitely better than a bloated one. In any case, it does an unparalleled job of portraying both childlike curiosity and childlike fear in one game. A fear that's only intensified in its sequel, which somehow manages to ramp up the horror significantly. But before that, we have a little detour, because there's another tale unfolding within the moor, that of the runaway kid. And just like its predecessor, this DLC opens with a dream. A young boy treading water in endless darkness, no idea where he is or where he's going, floating without meaning until a hand reaches up and drags him down. Waking, we find the runaway kid in a familiar location, the bedroom where Six first encountered the janitor at the start of the game. The kid we're playing as doesn't have a name. He's only ever identified as the runaway kid, so for the purpose of this video, I'll be referring to him as K. Leaving our bed to look around, like last time, there's sleeping children we cannot rouse. If only the kid did something to get them up and about. Maybe some gamer subs? Gamer subs! Don't skip off. This isn't a regular ad, this is a partnership. And to celebrate this fact, for the next 48 hours, using my link down below and using code POINTLESS, you'll be able to get a free sample pack. It costs nothing, and that's better than something. You don't even need to provide your card details. Whoa! If you've watched my channel for a while, you'll know I'm very sparing about sponsorships. I've only partnered with Gamer Subs because I actually like the product. It's keto friendly, it's sugar free, it tastes great. Hell, it probably cures something. But I'm not a doctor, so that's not financial advice. And if you guys show enough support, I'm excited to see where we can take this partnership in the future. We're talking my own bespoke shaker, maybe even a totally pointless flavor? Question mark. In the script. The samples are free for 48 hours, but my code POINTLESS lasts forever and offers 10% off on anything you buy. So go and treat yourself. Buy the Pyro Chubby Shaker, but use my code while you do it. Still not convinced? Fine. Trade offer. If enough people buy the product using my code, I'll make the Manhunt 2 video, the one I haven't been able to make because I know that it will be demonetized. That's the beauty of supporting alternate revenue streams. I don't have to be reliant on the teat of Susan. Link in the pinned comment and the description. Check it out and feel extra smug knowing that the product you're enjoying is helping your boy out. Back in the bedroom, we hear a ruckus unfolding downstairs. And following the sounds, we discover the janitor alive and well with both arms still intact. As such, this story takes place before Six disarmed, oh snap, the monster. Traveling in the opposite direction to Six, we drop down in front of the security eye where we discover another child with a flashlight who runs off as we approach. It's the first time we've encountered a kid within the moor that isn't El Kippo, so she's got to be important. And chasing her through the play area, we discover that she's the one that created the blanket rope. We're experiencing their daring escape firsthand. Following her down and dropping into an open drain, we arrive in a flooded basement, finding her torch sitting on the floor, abandoned. Taking it and looking around, there's leech sludge smeared on the floor, marked with the girl's footsteps and handprints. Following them, we don't find the girl. Instead, we find a leech, implying that this daring child met a grisly end, consumed alone and in the shadows. A fate we'll face too if we're not careful, because the area is swarming with the buggers. Carefully avoiding them, we eventually drop into a large body of water where an unknown creature is lurking. It would seem his nightmare is manifest. This level consists of various water obstacles punctuated by an aquiline beast, ready to drown us if we're caught slacking. Using slabs of meat, we distract the creature while making panicked swims across large distances, and if you're afraid of water, these moments will really fuck with you. Hell, even if you love deep water, these moments are nerve-wracking. There's something primitively horrific about being chased through water, and it doesn't help that some of the planks aren't even safe. Yeah, that moment shit me up, I can't lie. And having a fear of water, it's actually quite common. My sister hates the stuff, won't go anywhere near it. Luckily, it only comprises about 71% of the rock, so she's all good. And I could spend hours going into the many reasons why this fear is there, even just from a cultural perspective, but instead I'd recommend 2 videos to watch if you're interested. Jacob Geller's fear of big things underwater, and Nextpo's fear of the deep. Check them out. 2 smaller YouTubers that need the shout out. But in the DLC, that fear is personified with this beast, or the granny as she's referred to, appearing as a haggard old old witch with pale skin and slick black hair. She's similar in appearance to the bathtub lady from The Shining and is possibly based on the legend of Jenny Greenteeth, a river hag from English folklore that would pull children and the elderly into rivers to drown them. Honestly, what is it with old folklore? It's all morbid as hell. Like, surely times were hard enough back then as it was. You should be worrying about the bubonic plague, not scaring young Beowulf down yonder.
Ripper, Terror.
But after giving us hell for half the level, we finally get our own back, powering up a TV and giving the beloved hag the old toaster and bathtub treatment. Fears conquered, we climb a rickety staircase, pass through a hatch, and find our luck run dry because we're caught by an all too familiar set of arms. And as the chapter ends, we see a shocking sight. Six trapped in her cage, with our new protagonist, Kay, being dragged off by the janitor. A full circle moment bringing us back to the start of chapter 2. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. That's a depressing ending. We know what happens to those children. They're bundled and ate. Well, thankfully, Kay's story isn't over. Starting Act 2, we find him hanging from the meat conveyor, parceled as we expected, but unlike the others, he's not dead. Not only that, but we manage to wriggle and escape, dropping into the expanse below. And no, it's never really explained how we survived while no one else did. I guess bro's got deliverance activated, I don't know. In any case, we've landed deep in the moor, a location 6 never visited, the engine level, specifically coal storage. Dusting ourselves off and exploring the area, we stumble across a gnome stuck in the door, and after freeing it and giving him a little hug, we hear a more cheerful jingle play. There's a deeper connection being made here. We're not just finding the gnomes, we're working with them, using this gnome specifically to help with our escape, throwing him to open doors, pull down levers, and even push heavy boxes out of the way. And he ain't the only gnome either, because there's 2 more in the area we need to hug and indoctrinate. I am God, you will obey me. Amassing a small group and utilizing them like a twisted version of Pikmin to solve various puzzles. Reaching the center of this level, we stumble across the main engine room, where we finally get an idea of what role these gnomes play aboard the moor. They're not mere stowaways, they're the workers, toiling to keep the engine running, endlessly adding coal to the fire. This is likely another reference to Spirited Away. These creatures are more or less the soot sprites, who help maintain the bathhouse by fueling the engine with coal. The engine serves as a hub for exploration. We need to power up the conveyor behind us and ride it to safety, but to do that, we've got to find more gnomes and bring them to the furnace to up the power. Exploring the path to our right, we enter a large pitch black room where the janitor makes a return, lurking in the shadows waiting to catch us off guard, because now we're in total darkness. We're living in the janitor's world, and to make matters worse, the area is scattered with piles of coal that will crunch and alert the janitor if we step on them. It reminded me a lot of the first encounter with High Lord Wolnir in Dark Souls 3, which, despite being a slightly gimmicky fight, is still cinematically one of my favourite bosses in the entire franchise. Other than this encounter, the rest of the level's pretty standard stuff. Solve a puzzle, catch a gnome, and bring them back to the engine. Gather enough, and the conveyor springs into life, allowing us to catch a ride to the upper levels where we meet a dead end, a suitcase we can't budge. But thankfully, our friends pull up and help out. Unlike Six, who can temporarily make friends with the gnomes, the runaway kid genuinely seems accepted by this species. They're actively looking out for him, finding ways to assist, and for a child that's utterly alone, this connection is invaluable. Suitcase relocated, we step through and discover a small gnome community, huddled together in front of a furnace's amber glow, staying warm and just chilling together. It's a small, hopeful spot in an otherwise brutal vessel, and it's great to see the gnomes getting fleshed out with a more believable existence outside the protagonist. They're just as scared and vulnerable as we are, relying on community and finding companionship where and when they can. Passing through, we drop on top a lift as it rides up, panning out to reveal the masked lady. Wherever she's headed, we're following. A risky move that concludes this chapter as the screen dips to black. Act 3 starts a short while later, with Kay fast asleep. Millennials, eh? What will we do with them? Taking a vent out, we drop into a familiar looking location, the ladies' quarters, but a section we haven't explored yet, more of a study than the living quarter from earlier, and as you might expect, the lady's lurking nearby. Stood up ahead in front of a broken mirror, stroking a doll. In fact, there are dozens of dolls spread around her, children with porcelain faces, sat alongside a key we have zero hopes of grabbing. So we sneak past and enter a large hall. Much like the engine room, this is a hub space, connecting Kay to several puzzles with the aim of gathering 3 statues and unlocking a way out. It's a very Spencer's Mansion approach to home design. Like someone once said to an architect, "Please sir, make my day-to-day life absolute fucking hell." This DLC is far more puzzle orientated than the base game, which I personally think is a good move. Each area has more substance because you spend longer exploring and appreciating each room rather than quickly passing through in a mad dash. They offer different, equally enjoyable experiences, but if you like puzzles, like many old school horror fans do, this DLC should appeal to you. They're not overly complex, more observational. The first one requires us to return books to a bookshelf based on the icons on their spine. Once placed, we discover a secret room with a fake statue we can use to Indiana Jones a real one in an adjacent room where the ceiling would normally crush us. See, I told you, Spencer's Mansion type shit.
Are you saying I was manufactured?
The second statue's accessed by playing around with this gyroscopic light gizmo. Now, I'm sure there's always a pattern to learn with puzzles like these, but I can literally never be asked, so I always just press buttons until it's over. This is called the caveman technique, and it works damn near every time. Lights aligned, we solve a second, painting-based puzzle and grab another statue. Sneaking out, we place the idol and hear a strange sound. Not only that, but the lady, she isn't humming anymore. And making our way across, we see all kinds of movement in our peripheral. Shadows of children running between cover. As a matter of fact, this isn't the first time they've appeared. Throughout this whole area, as we've been solving puzzles, these remnants have been observing us in blink and you'll miss them moments from behind books or around pedestals. They're very invested in our journey, and reaching the stand where the lady once stood, we find her missing and the doll standing in her place. These dolls are not friendly, charging straight for us if we get close. The only way to defend ourselves is with a flashlight. Shine on them for long enough and they disappear, leaving a shattered mask behind. Other than the mirror encounter, this is our first time actually fighting in the game. It's Alone in the Dark meets Alan Wake meets Sesame Street. These dolls, or shadow children as they're called, there isn't much known about their origins. The only theory I can make is that perhaps they're the spirits of the lady's victims trapped inside the masked dolls we saw stacked earlier, corrupted and forced to carry out her bidding. Call me Armstrong, because I do be stretching sometimes.
He bends, he stretches.
Grabbing the key, we hunt down the final statue while shadows hide around every corner waiting to ambush us, resulting in several tense standoffs where one wrong move results in an instant death. Grabbing and placing the last statue, the exit finally opens, where for the first time, we stumble across the lady with her mask off. She's old and decrepit, with pale, sagging skin. She was once a beautiful woman, as we see through a painting in her study, and now she looks monstrous, an affliction likely caused by her powers. She's extended her life, but her body is crumbling regardless, something she can't stand to witness. Now, that is the prevailing theory. However, there's another possibility to consider. Some people, far smarter than I, have used mods to boundary break and get a look at the woman's face in the base game. And surprisingly, rather than the grotesque monster, we find a normal looking woman. Granted, this could just be a placeholder. It's also possible that what we're seeing in this DLC isn't how the lady really looks, but rather some form of dysmorphia, where either Kay or the lady herself are so repulsed by her actions that the beast we see reflected is only a symbolic representation rather than her literal form. Whatever the case, this does make Six's mirror battle slightly confusing, because evidently she can look at her own reflection, so I'm not sure why it caused damage in the game's conclusion. Maybe the mirror Six used was magic, or maybe it was just a continuity error. I don't know. But as we try to sneak past, the damn floorboard creaks again. She knows we're here, and running through the darkness, she's hot on our tail, chasing us through her study until we manage to break away and get a moment's respite. But just when we think we're home free, we're ambushed, caught by her powers, where we finally get to see what she does to runaway children. Kay has been transformed into a gnome. This is her secret ability and the source of all the gnomes throughout the moor. Their cute, childlike behaviour, it's because they were children, ones that couldn't be controlled, and so with the lady's power, they've been turned into the ship's workforce, pushed into servitude for a vessel that would otherwise have consumed them, which completely recontextualises the gnomes within this story. They've become infinitely more tragic, and their scared behaviour and scribbled drawings all make sense now, adding an entirely new layer of tragedy to each encounter leading to this moment. These two stories, Six and the Runaway Kid, they serve as opposites. Six's tale is about empowerment and overcoming authority, while the runaway child is about hopelessness and oppression. And speaking of finding ourselves transformed, we stumble away from the ladies' quarters and through the guest area, dropping down gaps and passing through cracks until we arrive at a familiar location. Tragically, just like Act 1, the runaway kid's tale ends with one last encounter with Six. Six not only ate the gnome in her hunger-induced delirium, but a child, the runaway kid, who only ever tried to help people and escape the moor. To me, this is exactly how you do a DLC. It provides its own tale with new mechanics and areas to explore, but more importantly, it changes the core experience of Little Nightmares. Gnomes in general become so much more complex and interesting, and Six, though she likely isn't aware, has become infinitely more wicked and evil with her actions. It's superb, layered storytelling, and with that, the first game and its many nuances have been fully covered. And now, it's time for the main course, Little Nightmares 2. And if you thought the first game was disturbing, believe me, you ain't seen nothing yet. So one last time, we begin this tale with a dream. Now we find ourselves in control of a new protagonist, a boy named Mono, with a brown paper bag covering his face, sat in front of TV, whose static quickly fades. Not only is the protagonist different, but the environment is too. Featuring an open, dense forest, it's still dark and spooky, but it's more open than the metallic moor, an instant contrast to the first game's claustrophobic atmosphere. As usual, without any real sense of purpose, all we can do is push forward. And as that familiar sense of dread begins to build up, we discover a hanging net filled with bodies. We're in a hunting ground and humans are the prey. Something we confirm a moment later when we encounter an active trap. This is one of many littering the forest. We have to be vigilant, jumping over tripwires or setting them off with previous victims' shoes. Some of them are even hidden amongst the leaves, making them hard to spot until it's too late, like these here bear traps. Thankfully, we can use the environment to help, wielding branches to test the way, or throwing acorns to cause a chain reaction. And I love how they all snap up here. It's such an aggressive, visceral reaction. They're inanimate objects, but it still feels like they're trying to intimidate us, snapping at one another like piranhas. Following the trail, eventually we stumble across an old wooden bungalow, seemingly abandoned. And ignoring our better judgment, we head in through the window and arrive in the kitchen, finding a pot filled with slop and a kettle on the boil. Whoever lived here, they left in a hurry. Venturing out, we hear a noise from downstairs. A child's jingle, and following it to the source, behind a locked door, we discover an imprisoned child. Grabbing an axe from the storeroom, we start hacking at the rotten planks, tearing it apart, and once inside, we approach the child. Pushing us to the ground, she runs away, and given the universe this game takes place in, I can't fault her paranoia. Chasing them upstairs, we follow the girl through a dining room, where we get our first look at the residents of this building. A family sat ready for dinner, still as puppets. Their glassy, almost content stares as we passed through was palpable because you wait expectantly the whole time for something to spring to life and attack you, but they never do. Passing through a vent, we find the girl hanging from a handle, unable to shift it. With nowhere to run and the realization that she needs our help, a temporary non-verbal partnership is formed, and boosting us up, the two work together to open the loft. This is the biggest feature of the sequel. We're no longer alone. This girl will help us solve puzzles, assist our escape, and even hold our hand. Lonely and looking for human connection? Well, this game was made for you. Working through the loft, we managed to find a key for the exit. One we hook on our belt. No more holding keys in our hands like peasants. The key itself was hanging from a hook, and to reach it, we needed a winch. One we find in the clutches of this woman hunched over in a chair. But looking closer, you can see she's stuffed, which is likely the same fate the family downstairs suffered. We know someone's capturing humans in the forest. Couple this with the various tools and doll parts, it's possible to theorize that some hunter, they're using these people to satisfy a twisted taxidermy pastime. Even more reason to get the fuck out. But on our way back, a familiar face, or lack thereof, makes an appearance. A gnome scurries off, which means we can chase it down. Mono has that predatory instinct. If something runs, this boy gives chase. Climbing higher into the loft, the little fella starts playing funny buggers, running around and hiding until we scare him off into a pitch black room. The only light source here is a candle and a match being held by the gnome. He'll follow us wherever we go, so using the light, we guide it along and activate the power. Visibility restored, we climb up the shelf, head to its location, but find him missing. And now this might seem like an unnecessary detour, but I had to mention it because it was paid DLC, which is crazy because it is remarkably unremarkable. I mean, you do get a gnome hat to wear, but it's just too soon. I haven't fully recovered from my DLC trauma yet, plus it's not oversized like the gnomes, so it kinda looks sus. A little white boy running around wearing a white combed hood. I don't know, it might send the wrong kind of message. Unlocking the back door, we pass through a garden and head into a shed where we hear a strange noise. The hunter at work stood by the exit skinning some unidentifiable thing. And as is the staple of the franchise, we need to pass behind. Thankfully, there's no creaky floorboards, but the only way out is this rusted meat chute, one that makes a bunch of noise as we pass through. The chase is on now, and unlike the others, this hunter is armed. It's not enough to just blindly run. We have to wait for him to shoot first, then sprint while he reloads. And the game does a fantastic job of adding real weight to each shot. In a way, this whole scene is similar to the start of Ratatouille, a curious small creature that enters a farmhouse only to be chased away by a maniac with a shotgun blowing holes in every surface. Chasing us downhill, we dip into an overhang, and dare I reference two movies back to back because this scene is just like Frodo hiding from the ring wraith in the Shire. But here at least we get our first look at the hunter, and my word, what a dapper young gentleman he is. Adorned with a hunting jacket, peaky blinder hat, and more notably a sack covering his face with a singular dirty hole to peer out.
Tommy, we need more money, Tommy.
Using the tall grass as cover, we slowly make our way past him through a burrow and arrive at a large gorge. It's too big a gap to jump, so we pull up the hanging planks and let the girl jump across. And after politely reminding her to come back for us, we have to make a leap of faith, trusting our lives to a person we met only moments before. It's not long before the hunter's back on our trail though, shooting in our direction as we run through another shed, a muddy swamp, and finally into a small shack where this chase comes to an end with Mono and the girl trapped. There's no way out and the hunter's breaking in, but thankfully there is something we can use, a spare shotgun hanging on the wall. And after dropping it off the rack, with the help of the girl, we line up a shot. Ears ringing, it would seem we've saved ourselves, shooting through the door and putting an end to our hunter's pursuit. And let this be a learning moment. Never leave a weapon unattended near children you're trying to murder. Conveniently, when we dropped the shotgun, the screen behind it fell away, which means we have a way out, and through the window, we hear waves crashing. Stepping through, there's a small beach with a door washed up on the shore. Something the girl instantly starts pushing, wanting to ride out. And while it's not a great plan, Mono's happy to agree. So, living their best Rose life, the two embark on a cross-sea journey. Sailing for some time, wordless, until items start floating beside them. At first, it's a bottle, but then multiple TVs, and moments later, our destination comes into view. The Pale City, with its buildings shifting with a life of their own. Docking our vessel and passing through an old tenement building, we find more references to an apparent fear of the television sets, with several smashed piles of them, along with what looks like a suited TV effigy. It looks as if the residents were destroying them, but where are they now? The mystery doesn't end there either, because after looking around, we enter a bar and find a TV that isn't destroyed, one that springs into life, radiating a mysterious energy that appears to hurt Mono, almost like the signals breaking him down on a molecular level. Reaching the screen, Mono places his hand and appears to tame it, aligning a hallway several times before physically entering the screen, arriving in the same blue hallway from the start of the game, except this time, Mono's running down it, heading towards the door, and just as we're about to reach it, the girl pulls us back to reality. Could this explain what happened to the inhabitants of the town? Is some evil signal luring them in, keeping them there, and then eventually consuming them? Heading into the back alley and ducking under a chain link fence, we arrive in a playground belonging to the Pale City's esteemed school. And what better a place for two kids to hang out than an educational institution? So after we're done fooling around, we head inside to see what we can find. Dropping into the second story and passing through the empty halls, it doesn't take long for the monster lurking within to tease their presence. Some long-necked creature contorting out of sight. That's not good. And down the hall, we discover that the area's breasty trapped. The school's riddled with them, swinging buckets, falling lights, and tumbling lockers. It's some Home Alone type shit, except unlike the movies, these swinging things will knock our block off. And to make matters worse, some of them are just plain wicked. Almost every trap is triggered by a notably raised plank, but just as we acclimate to this visual cue, we reach this here trap, and it's an inanimate piece of wooden shit. Jumping over the raised plank, they swap the trigger out, making the third board activate the trap. The devs were straight messing with us, using our instinctual pattern recognition to lull us into a false sense of security before dropping the hammer. But just down from the first trap, we catch a glimpse of a child running away. One of several hiding in the area, waiting for a chance to strike. Trapping Mono, the children grab the girl, revealing that they're not real kids at all, but rather porcelain puppets designed to mimic them, some of which even have broken heads, revealing empty basins. These dolls are referred to as bullies, and they live up to their name, dragging our friend away to the floor above. Once again, we're utterly alone and the girl is in danger. We need to rescue her, and searching for a way up, we stumble across a hammer. Now, I'm no big brain, but as far as I know, paper beats rock, rock beats scissors, and large hammer beats porcelain. Sadly, we're not empowered for long. The hammer isn't an item we equip, but rather drag behind us. So when we climb up this chair, it gets ditched, returning you to your more natural, defenseless state. You weak little bitch. On the upside, we find the lift, but that shit's locked down, and to get the key, we need to pass through a classroom in full swing. We're just out of focus, we discover the teacher. This encounter, it's a twist on the previously established pass-behind creature shtick, this time with a red light, green light approach. While she's writing, it's safe to move between the desks. but when she stops, you best be hiding. Make too much noise or get caught and she sends the troops in. This scene is a great visualization of why these dolls are called bullies, because they'll chase you through the halls as a vicious gang before pinning you down and doing ungodly things that would put fear and hunger to shame. Not only that, but it plays into another fear, one all too common in the education system, being a victim of bullying, a singular child isolated and ganged up on by others. It's simple but effective. Sneaking through, we find the key. It's on top of a shelf, but when we climb up, the entire unit tips forward and crashes into the floor, attracting the teacher's attention. And rather than walking in like a normie, she goes for the optimal form of investigation, stretching her neck to an impossible length and slithering around the room with a cold, vacant expression. To me, this character is designed to play into the fear of snakes, or snake-like creatures, because when that baby's fully extended, it's essentially what we're dealing with. A monster that's part teacher, part snake, and it's icky. Ew, that's icky. Back in the classroom, with the teacher thoroughly irritated, returning to the lift won't be so simple. No longer waiting by the chalkboard, instead she's walking between desks, approaching and ironically intimidating the bullies, all of which look terrified by this serpentine principal. She's a caricature of over-authoritarian educators, slapping the table with a ruler and staring the children down. But the real takeaway is just how meaningless the entire class is. These aren't real children, and she's not even writing anything on the board. It's all fake. A pantomime indulging whatever twisted fantasy this teacher's living out. Now the nerds will be saying you have to sneak at this part, but you can just run for dear life down the hall and into the elevator with the teacher hot on your tail. Isn't school just great? Upstairs, we encounter a bully being disciplined, scribbling eyes nonsensically on the floor and wall. Getting closer, it acts like a rabid animal, charging at us before getting yanked back by its restraint. The white hat it's wearing, at first you might think it's a reference to the gnomes, but based on the setting and the disciplinary position we find him, it's more likely a dunce cap, a historic form of punishment for children considered disruptive or slow of learning. Baiting the bully into attacking us, we grab a metal pipe and put him out of his misery. And I suppose in hindsight, I don't know if he was in misery. The next area we encounter is the kitchen, marked by the growing noises of pure mayhem. Here we have a dramatic standoff, grabbing a ladle as several bullies charge at us one after the other, getting dispatched without mercy until heads roll. Literally, one of the heads will roll to the floor, which we can wear as a disguise and pass through the army of bullies occupying the dining room. All of which act like animals, or more specifically, like gremlins. Smashing plates, smearing food, and fighting amongst themselves. It seems that when the teacher isn't around, they devolve into utter bedlam, something that actually plays to our advantage, because everyone's too distracted to see through our weak disguise. For the next while, we quietly make our way through multiple encounters with the teacher while she passively prepares different classes for the students. Much like the first game, the sequel does a great job conveying that each creature, they have a life of their own outside of the main character. They don't just exist for on-the-rails frights. They have a purpose and goal until they catch us acting a nuisance, at which point the throat goat starts stretching towards us like it's no one's business. Slipping past, we're moments away from rescuing our friend, and with steel determination, Mono smashes through countless dolls, marches into the restroom, and finds the girl hanging from the ceiling. Giving the final two bullies a stern talking to, we free our friend and have a tender reunion. It's an important scene because we see firsthand that Mono is a vastly different character to Six, who never thought twice about leaving people behind. In contrast, Mono just put himself through hell to find and save, more or less, a stranger. A stranger who immediately after their rescue displays surprising savagery. Approaching a bully, Mono sneaks round to grab a hammer, but there's no need. The girl sneaks up and with her bare hands bludgeons the creature to death. Well, she put you to shame, Mono. That's all I know. We're almost free of the school now. There's only one room left to navigate. The teacher's private study, where Mono needs to lower a platform for the two to pass, while the teacher belts out a banger. But after climbing up and opening the vent, a metallic screech catches her attention. But that's not our problem, we'll just hide in the vent like we always do, oh sweet baby Jesus. For the first time in the entire franchise, the vent isn't a safe space. Determined to hunt us down, the snakehead rams its way inside, bursting the vent walls and inching closer as we run through the tunnel. Finally back out in the open, and with the rain hammering down, we cross the city and make our way to shelter, looking for something to keep the girl warm, or should I say, dry. The notorious yellow jacket. As I'm sure many will have guessed, or again, known from the promotional material, our partner isn't any ordinary child. They're Six, just without the raincoat or supernatural powers she acquires at the end of the first game, which means this isn't a sequel at all, but rather a prequel, and this is the moment Six finds her raincoat. Of course, Mono has no idea the significance or what's to become of her, so we continue as normal, blissfully unaware, until we stumble across the next major location. It's a hospital, which, yay, nothing bad ever happens here. Inside, things are exactly as you'd expect. Fucking awful. Bloodstained beds, scattered medical equipment, and bodies in wheelchairs. Passing through the atrium, we push a heavy set of doors, only for Mono to tumble into an empty expanse. A large chunk of the hospital's gone, crumbled into the ravine below, leaving a mess of tangled beds. We need to reach the other side, and Six is quick to take control, speeding across, almost like Six finding her jacket has returned her to the more proficient self we saw inside the moor. Buckling over, we stumble through the dark and into the lobby, where we discover another TV, this time surrounded by mannequins placed in mock viewership. Aligning the hallway and warping inside, we're even closer to the door now, running to within a few steps before getting pulled out. It would seem Six isn't affected by the signal, and she doesn't want us messing around with it either. Much like the engine room, the lobby offers a small hub to explore. We need to find 2 fuses, and in search of the first, we pass through an operating room where we see a body ready for conversion. Sat in front shelves, stacked with prosthetics, hooks and claws. Mono and Six have to split up here, and after passing through a shattered door light, the area's first enemy is revealed. Detaching from a restrained body, a sentient hand scuttles away, lurking in the shadows before chasing us down and trying to latch onto Mono's face. This monster strikes a weird spot between being hilarious and terrifying. Detached hands usually appear in horror comedies like The Evil Dead, Medieval, or Elden Ring. They'll strike different chords depending on how you view them, and with their movement style, they almost play into arachnophobia, fear of spiders, because that's the personality they adopt while hunting us. And to make matters worse, that motherfucker can climb and enter vents just like us. I stopped giggling real quick. Thankfully, we don't have to run for long, because we quickly find a hammer, which means it's time to fight. Except this little bugger's harder than our previous encounters, able to dodge our attacks, and taking several hits to put down. He's fast moving, but once you learn the rhythm, it's easy enough to dispatch. And sadly, on this playthrough, the fuse was missing. It was meant to be on the desk here, but it just wasn't. So I loaded the chapter and found it sat in the doorway, but when I tried to bring it back to the fuse box, it floated away. Thankfully, the game thought I still had it, so I could progress. But Lord knows what would have happened had I let go. Anyway, with the left wing open, we head in for the second fuse, where once again, we separate from 6. But this time, the way forward's blocked by a patient standing in a doorway. And after pulling a switch behind us, the lights flick off and on, plunging the room into darkness where the patient starts to rumble, edging closer each time. It's a great way to convey a game mechanic while still building tension, because once that bulb blows, this creature dashes towards us. No more edging, he's going full bust. You either have your torch ready, or you learn its importance real quick. Oh yeah, we found a torch earlier. Do I need to explain what this does? Have you played a horror game? Sadly, this patient's only the tip of the iceberg, because the left wing is swarming with patients ready to pull us apart in increasingly larger numbers. And while it might seem wise or even natural to approach these encounters with slow, careful movement, I found moving fast to be the better tactic. Slow movement lets them close the distance, whereas moving fast and flicking between multiple patients gets you out of the room faster, which in many cases is a lifesaver. When they're coming at you fast, getting the beam to aim where you want it, it can feel like a guessing game, which makes getting caught frustrating at times. Although there is a case to be made for this design. If it was super easy to control, these encounters wouldn't be half as scary. It's our struggle to wrangle them up that makes the moment so tense, so maybe the awkward controls are for the best, because there is more vulnerability as a result. Managed to survive these encounters, and shortly after, we find the second fuse. Although instead of heading up, we descend for a long while until we arrive in the basement, where we get our first look at the madman behind these creations. A maggot-like beast hanging from the ceiling with pale, droopy skin. He's still carrying out various experiments, frequently letting out something between a laugh and a cry. Despite his bulk, he's still super mobile and even able to pull up any cover we're hiding under. Which means the hide and run tactics we've employed thus far are no longer viable. And as fun as cheesing a hiding spot was, I enjoyed having to tackle this monster with increased seriousness. Now if we're spotted, we're in real trouble, making the doctor much more intimidating. He'll roam the area, checking on patients while we track down a doll's head and open a security gate, an act that instantly grabs his attention, where I managed to escape with sheer fucking will alone. That's right, undoctored footage of a giant monster getting put in a spliff. I smoked that bitch. After leaving, Mono and Six continue searching for a way out, heading through a morgue before running into the doctor one last time. Sprinting away from the morgue, we jump under and over various beds and shelves, ultimately luring him into a furnace. Dropping under the gurney, we sneak out a vent at the bottom and slam the door shut, where we actually have a choice. We can walk away and let him starve to death, which nets us an achievement reading, "It's crueler to let him live." Or we can flick a switch, cremating the croissant-shaped bugger once and for all. And finally, leaving the hospital, we head out again to the cold, wet streets of the Pale City. And while crossing an alley, we see something falling in the background, just out of focus. It's impossible to see what it was, but one after the other, more objects fall. It's not until we make it to the other side that it becomes clear. They're bodies. People are dropping from the rooftops, like that movie where trees are killing people because they have hurt feelings.
I'm talking about a completely superfluous bottle of cough syrup.
Heading into a larger building complex, we discover more citizens, but these ones are alive. And while they're not actively hostile, if we bump into one, they're not friendly either, twisting around to not stare at us and emitting a strange, deadly signal. Once again, their obsessions with the TV persists. They peek through door cracks and even sit in their bathtubs endlessly watching. This obsession with TVs, it could be taken as another dig at excessive consumption. Something that was represented in the first game with food is now critiqued through content addiction. There's something philosophical about Zoomers and TikTok. Making our way to the building's roof, miles in the distance, we see a tall building with a light radiating from the top. This is the signal tower, and given the game's emphasis on the TVs, it must be our destination. Also, I'm a sucker for the wet, grimy city aesthetic. I know it's cliche, but when it's done right, it is a beautiful visual. Batman Arkham Knight came out 8 years ago, but it nailed this aesthetic, and it genuinely still holds up visually to this day against the best of them.
That place is locked down tighter than my mother on prom night.
Making our way to ground level, we pass through an unstable structure, and after pushing a door down, the building starts to crumble. Running through, we're nearly in the clear when Six stumbles and falls, but we don't have time to save her, so we jump. When the dust settles, we find Mono next to the flashlight, broken. But more concerningly, we see Six buried under the rubble. Obviously, she's not crushed, but after Mono pulls her from the wreck, there's a tense moment where she looks right at him. No words are exchanged, but you can feel the implication. Mono jumped to safety, leaving her for dead, something she's all too aware of. But hey, Six is known for being reasonable, I'm sure she'll understand. And after heading into a nearby apartment, we discover another TV. Except this time, we've reached the end of the hallway. The only thing left to do is see what's on the other side. Slowly, the door peels back, revealing the true antagonist of this game, the Thin Man, waiting and now freed. Returning to reality, in true Ringu fashion, the Thin Man materializes from the screen. And as time slows, he chases us through the living room and into a bedroom where Mono ducks under a bed and Six tucks herself under a small table, but it's no good. Reaching out as Mono cowers, Six is captured by the Thin Man. Leaving only for a moment a glitched shadow. It would seem we freed some powerful entity able to manipulate reality. So was this the purpose of the signal all along? To lure a capable soul into freeing the Thin Man? It's not clear just yet, but Six is gone, and wandering back to the TV, it's still active. Interacting with it seems like a bad move, but we have no other choice. We're in a dead end, so we step inside, except this time the hallway's gone, and in its place we see a tunnel of fleshy gore. One Mono floats through before appearing elsewhere. And just putting the teleportation aside for a moment, what in the name of Howard Philip Lovecraft was that mound of flesh? The best theory I have is that maybe it's an amalgamation of everyone the signal's consumed. All of the clothing lying around with no bodies, maybe that's what happened to them. The signal makes them obsessed before eventually absorbing them. We're in a new part of the city now, with one goal, to save Six. But now, Mono can move freely between TV sets. Something we utilize to cross impassable gaps, lore-obsessed citizens, or get inside shop windows while a horde hunts us down. Mob avoided, we eventually discover a new TV with a distinct shadow. Six is calling out to us. But as we try and pull her to safety, she's dragged back. All we've done is alert the Thin Man to our presence. Crawling out, we start frantically cutting down a door as we get a glimpse of what he actually looks like, and surprisingly, he's not a monster at all. I mean, sure, he's tall, but his face is normal with no horrific twists or deformities, and with a slow stride, he marches towards us, It Follows style, through apartments, down hallways, and eventually through an abandoned train, somehow suspended between buildings, as if it derailed at 100 miles an hour and jumped the ramp. Running down the aisles, we're able to decouple the front car and make our escape. Crashing downtown, where we're injured and guided forward by the remnants of Six. And there's something really interesting about this shadow, something very few will ever have noticed. She's been with us from the very start, appearing several times in the first game, hiding just out of sight every time we feed. There isn't much known about it, although the Shade's often referred to as Evil Six in the community despite never displaying any evil tendencies. A mystery made all the more confusing when you realise that the sequel also has dozens of other glitched shadow children we can collect. They're hidden in all sorts of locations, carrying out business as usual until Mono approaches and absorbs them. And they're not the only collectible either. As I alluded to earlier, Mono can find 12 hats scattered throughout, from a postman's cap to a damaged bear head. They're a far more rewarding collectible system than the statues from the first game. Yeah, do you remember them? I kind of let that point fizzle out because smashing them all only rewards us with one singular mask. It was super lackluster, but in the sequel, not only are there dozens of hats to collect, but the shadows, they actually offer an alternative ending, so they're 100% worth collecting. Not to mention the interesting, often disturbing scenarios we see them partaking in. But back to Mono, Six walks playfully ahead, leading the way towards a large ladder that will take us topside, to a road leading to the tower. But before we start our journey, the Thin Man appears, with the buildings themselves swaying in and out. Kneeling, we remove our hat and allow the rain to wash it away as the hunter approaches, but this isn't submission. Raising his hand, Mono starts disrupting the Thin Man. Matching our angle to that of the stranger, we gradually break him down. A big inspiration for this battle was a 1998 movie called The Dark Sea. And while it's more of a cerebral thriller than a horror, the visuals are strikingly similar, and I plan on making a video about it in the near future. So I won't be spoiling anything, but if you like the themes of this game, go and watch it. You won't be disappointed.
Shut it down!
In the meantime, we have a battle to conclude, and after beating the Thin Man back several times, the signal finally falters. Turning to dust, we stand triumphant, and rather than walking the distance to the tower, somehow we make the tower come to us. Finally, the time is upon us. Time to rescue our friend and get some answers. So we enter the tower, the source of this deadly signal. Inside, reality is tearing apart. It's a mess of impossible design, objects suspended in air with stairs leading everywhere and nowhere. It mimics the work of M.C. Escher, specifically his Relativity and House of Stairs prints, which depicts surrealistic architectures looping endlessly, a visual style often adopted to portray anarchy and confusion. Look, things are getting out of hand. Get f***ed accessibility needs. We're outside the laws of nature here. We only have one objective, working our way up the tower, reaching Six, and rescuing her. A journey that begins with an endless series of doors, where at first you might feel lost. We're getting nowhere, looping in circles like the stairs themselves. That is, until we hear the music. This is our guiding star. No matter what, we follow this jingle. Whichever door rings the loudest, that's our path forward, entering door after door and heading up several flights of stairs before reaching the top and finding the source of this melody. A music box protected by a monstrous Six. Through some twisted power, she's become bestial with long arms and a hunched posture. It's a twisted play on the moment we initially encountered her, a young girl trapped, playing with a music box. And much like that first encounter, she's afraid. So by shouting, we lure her out. Where, like a child showing their mum macaroni glue art, she proudly displays the box for us, provided we don't get too close. And at the back, we find a hammer on a crushed suitcase, potentially the same one we found Six sleeping on at the start of the first game. Hammer in hand, there's only one choice. No, not attacking her, dumbass. She's well big. We need to break the music box. An act that feels cruel. We're attacking her only comfort, bringing her back to reality, sure. But what reality is it? It's cruel, wicked, and violent. There's an argument to be made that maybe ignorance is bliss. Cypher moment.
Ignorance is bliss.
Flicking temporarily to an unknown concrete plane, we return to the playroom to find the music box damaged and Six reeling in terror. And once that emotion passes, fury sets in. We need to run. As a fleshy mass pours into the tower, Six bounds after us, wailing and slamming through the halls until we come to a standoff. A small squared arena, one of several we have to navigate to defeat Six. Standing at the center, she'll protect the music box, and by using the teleporting doors, we shout to distract her before dipping through and getting a hit off. As a fight, I think it's the perfect conclusion for this franchise. One that's enjoyable and tense to play through, but also captures the vulnerable, mischievous personality that makes Mono and Six great characters. We only win by doing what we've always done, playing hide and seek while using our size and mobility to outwit the enemy. And once we've dealt enough damage, the box lies in tatters, so we drag the axe over and put an end to this. Once broken, the evil power manipulating Six is gone and she returns to her normal form. We've done the impossible, navigated the Pale City, beat the Thin Man, conquered the tower and saved our friend. An act the tower physically rebels against, collapsing in on itself with that same fleshy mass overflowing from every surface, hunting us down with wet, bulging eyes. The signal's power manifest. Running for their lives, the two head towards the exit, where Mono trips and falls as the path ahead tumbles into the abyss. So, Six reaches out and catches us. Hanging there, she looks dead into Mono's eyes, and to our horror, she lets go. Dropping Mono into an unknown expanse and exiting the tower. This is the end of Six's story, and the last time she ever laid eyes on Mono. So why did she let go? Well, that's all down to who she is as a person, because if we reflect on her past behaviour, at her core, she's always been an impulsive, self-centered character. And if we remember the previous chapter, when the building collapsed, Six stumbled and fell with Mono jumping to safety. Couple this with the moment the Thin Man first attacks, we hid under the bed and rather than helping her, we cowered in fear as she reached out. The point I'm making is maybe she was biding her time, waiting for revenge, ready to abandon Mono like he technically has on multiple occasions despite trying his best. Again, Six isn't necessarily being evil here, but she was let down by him various times. He's a risk, and in a world this hostile, you can't take that chance. This might even give more credit to my theories on the shadow of Six. When she was grabbed, the glitch was left behind and she transformed into a beast. But when she reverts to her normal self, she's far more cutthroat. Maybe this glitch was the last remnants of her innocence. Her childhood tore away the moment her trust was broken, the moment she felt truly abandoned. But the story isn't over yet, because miraculously, Mono survived. finding him stood in a fleshy pit where we walk aimlessly for a short while before stumbling across a wooden chair perched on top a mound. Approaching, various eyes open and observe us, a mountain of madness, so to speak. But there's nowhere left to go, so we take a seat and watch as time starts twisting. With the ticking of a clock, Mono waits outside space and time, growing from a small boy into a teenager and eventually a man, the Thin Man. And as the camera pans backwards, we find Mono sat in a small room behind a closed door down a long hallway, bringing this story back round in a depressing circle. Just like 6, through some unknown power, Mono's become the game's antagonist, or at least inherited their power, trapped in a paranormal cell, slowly losing his mind, waiting for freedom. So, is the Thin Man Mono, or is Mono becoming the next Thin Man? Well, for me, the more interesting, and in my opinion, likely theory, is that the signal is distorting time, and that the Thin Man was always Mono, traveling back to try and save his past self. His first appearance was solely to separate Mono from 6, and after that to try and prevent us from saving her. Potentially stopping Mono from being dropped in the first place. Even the way we defeat the Thin Man is interesting. We don't attack it, we just align our actions with his own, mimicking his movements until the signal fades away. Now I could be off my fucking rocker, but that appears to be symbolic of the loop we're stuck in. A futile, unstoppable circle that always ends the same way. This might even justify 6 dropping Mono. With his mask removed, maybe she looked at his face and recognized him as the Thin Man, and out of fear or an attempt to prevent the Thin Man from existing, she ran the math and dropped his ass. That said, remember earlier when I said collecting all the shadows offered an alternative ending? Well, collect all 18, and when we finish the game, we get a few extra moments with 6. Having left the tower, she's greeted by her shade, who points to a picture on the floor. An ad for the mall, and after looking at it, her belly growls, kickstarting the events of the first game, the Maw and 6's hunger. 2 stories, 2 circles, 2 very different fates. In conclusion, all I can say is that this franchise is phenomenal. Every single encounter, location, monster, even frame was a morbid joy to explore. And thematically, to me, the biggest theme of all these games is the cycle of becoming what you hate. In both games, we see the protagonist becoming the main villain, inheriting some monstrous power, as we see with 6 and the lady, and Mono with the Thin Man. They are at their core very similar stories told in vastly different lights, with 6's perspective showing empowerment and Mono's mocking the illusion of choice and the lack of freedom that power can provide in the wrong circumstances. And underpinning all of this is the game's constant moral ambiguity. 6 exists in this moral grey space that makes her character so engaging. Even after ruining Mono's life, there are still people arguing online that she's fundamentally a good person, but that's not who she is. The world of Little Nightmares is ugly and unforgiving, and if you want to survive it, you have to be too. Themes aside, as a massive movie buff, I loved seeing loads of pop culture inspirations, and not only that, but offering new ones for me to discover and appreciate, like The City of Lost Children. When a game manages to inspire intellectual curiosity, it's done an amazing thing, and that's something Little Nightmares nailed. It wasn't enough just to play the game. I had to know where the inspiration came from, what the developers were thinking, and that's really just a testament to how lovingly crafted the game is. I mean, each game even has its own color palette, and I could spend hours drooling over that fact along with its Tim Burton inspired art style, but the gist of it is that the first is dark and yellow, the second is pale and blue, and the third is bright and sandy. Yeah, you heard me. There's a third game on the way, and with all the unanswered questions, I'm as eager as anyone to see what secrets it might reveal. It's a co-op experience, which seems like the logical progression for the game, as long as the AI is still competent on its own, because I have no one to play this game with. Yeah, not much is known right now, but it looks like it takes place in a dusty apocalypse, so potentially a massive shift in tone. But no, in Tarsier, there'll be plenty of secrets lying in wait. This is probably the last video you'll get from me for several months. I'm taking some time off to enjoy Christmas, sculpt my abs, and spend time with loved ones. Then after that, I'm working on a gigantic video, so you'll have that to look forward to. Unless, of course, you buy some gamer subs, in which case I'll make a Manhunt 2 video before then. But until such a point, thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed this look at the many horrors of Little Nightmares.